Hey everyone, today we're going to be learning GDScript for Godot. Now, just a little disclaimer, I'm going to be making this video with the assumption that you have absolutely no programming knowledge whatsoever. So this is going to be for people who have never coded before. That might be a little boring to you if you already know a couple languages, but if you don't know any, you'll feel right at home. Okay, all I did right now is I opened up Godot. I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to call this project GDScript_tutorial. Create folder, create and edit. Alright, I'm going to click a new 2D scene, right click that, click attach script, create, and this is where all of our code is going to go. So, first things first, let's delete all of this stuff. Now let's talk about what this extends node2d means. Basically what that means is there's already some code for something called node2d, and everything that we write in here is extending it. So if we wanted to, we could access something that is only a part of a node2d. Now that doesn't matter too much right now, but I just wanted to get that out of the way because we're leaving it up there. The first thing we're actually going to talk about and code is what's known as a comment. A comment in code is something that we can read, but the text editor or code compiler will never read when we run it. To do a comment in Godot, what we do is we put a little hashtag symbol, and now everything we write on this line is a comment. I am a comment. Click enter. I am code. You'll see it's red because this is invalid code. We're going to be putting a lot of comments in our code here because it's really good for when you want to go back and look at something. I'm going to put another comment here. I'm going to say variables, which is the next subject that we're going to talk about. So what is a variable? A variable is essentially something which stores a value throughout your code. So let's say we want to use the number 5 a lot, but we don't want to type 5 every single time. What we could do here is say var integer equals 5. And that's an example of what's known as an integer. There are several types of variables. There's integer, string, array, dictionary, and those are the main types. Now, besides the integer, there is also what's known as a float or a double, which is just a decimal value. So, these are different types. Let's also create a string. This is going to be string, and now the difference between a string and an integer is that a string is surrounded by quotes, and anything you put in the quotes will be part of the string. So we could put 5 again, and that's a string version of 5, or we could put something like a sentence. Hello, I am a string. Alright, let's take a little break here, and let's print this out. Let's type the word print, parentheses, and then let's type string. Save it. Yes, we'll save it as this main scene. Press F5. No main scene has been detected. Click Node2D scene. Alright, let's make a func_ready. Now we don't need to worry about what this is yet, but all we're going to do in here is we're going to type print and we're going to type string. And then we're going to click F5. Now you'll see here in our output, we got hello, I am a string, because we're printing out hello, I am a string. So what does func_ready mean? Func_ready is a function. We're not going to talk about functions yet. I'm just going to explain what func_ready means. This is a function that is special because this runs right at the beginning of the code. So as soon as everything is ready, it's going to run. Now that's when we're doing our print statement. And that's when we're going to be doing all of our debug and testing code. So right now we're printing out string. We could also print out integer. Run that, and you'll see now we have a 5. What if we want to run multiple things? Well, we could do our own string in here, hello world. And now we're going to print out hello world and 5. And we get hello world and 5. That's because we're printing out two things here. This string that we just made and our integer. Now, what if we want to change our integer? Integer equals 2. Save that. Now we print out hello world 2. That's because we're declaring the integer up here. We need a declaration word, the name of our variable, and what it's equal to. Now we're saying, hey, get this variable integer and set it equal to 2 instead of 5. So we can change it. We could do the same thing for string. We could change string here to something else. Let's change string to hello. Now, just like you might assume, it's going to say hello world, hello. No, it won't, because I didn't change it here. We have to also say that we're going to print out the string. Now, it will say hello world, hello. All right. So what do we have here? What we've learned so far is how to declare a variable. We've learned what integers are, what strings are, how to change what a variable is, and how to print out a variable in our console. So now let's move on to functions before we get any further. So a function has two key things. It has a declaration and a calling of a function. This function ready, we don't actually see when it's called. It gets called somewhere else. So let's not pay too much attention to this, because that's a bad example. Let's make our own function. My function. In order to declare a function, we first say the func keyword, put a space. Now we're going to say something like what we want it to be called. I'm going to call this my function. Now you'll notice here I don't just type my function. There are two ways to do this in code. One is you make the second word capital. The other is you put an underscore. For GDScript, it's generally best practice to put an underscore, so that's what I'll be using. So I'll put my underscore function. That's the name of the function. And the reason for this, I want to make sure that I make this clear, is you cannot put spaces in between any of these. You also can't put a space in between the word integer. So if you have multiple words, put an underscore in between it. So my function. Then it gets parentheses, an arrow, and the type of function it is. For us, this is going to be a void function. What are we going to do in this function? Well, we're going to print hello world. Now you'll notice there's a little indent here. It's very important that for conditional statements and functions, you put that indent. Basically what this indent means is everything that's indented after this colon is part of the function. Okay, let's get rid of this calling under ready and press F5. Nothing happens. Why isn't it printing hello world? Well, that's because we never call the function. That's the second part of functions. So what we can say here is my underscore function and then put parentheses around it. Now we're calling the function. So we're saying, hey, get this function and do whatever's inside of it. Press F5. There we go. Now we have hello world, hello, which is exactly what we want. So far, so good. Now, there's different kinds of functions. What if I wanted to just not have a type here, and I just wanted to write it like this, with a colon? I could do that. You don't have to give it a type. So in fact, I would recommend that you don't give it a type. Now, let's test out a return statement. Let's say return 6 and run it. Okay, nothing different happens. Well, let's do this. let's say var test equals my function. And then let's print test. So what we're doing here is now we're saying, hey, set test equal to this function. And this test is actually going to equal 6, and that's because we're returning 6 here. This is what's known as a return statement. Now functions can be blank, and you could do some code in a function, or they could return something. Here we're returning 6. So if I press F5, you'll see we get another line here, we get 6. That's because, just like I said, we're returning 6 and setting it equal to this variable test. And then when we print test, we get 6. Now, one last thing we're going to talk about with functions is what's known as parameters. A parameter is anything that you put inside of these parentheses. So let's put num1, comma, num2. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to pass two numbers. Let's pass 6 and 3. And instead of returning 6, we're going to return a variable. So let's say var sum equals num1 plus num2. And then let's return the sum. So what we're saying here is we have a function. This function takes in two numbers, num1 and num2. Now inside of the function, we take num1, we add it to num2, and we set the variable sum equal to the addition of those two numbers, right? The sum of the two numbers. And then we return the sum. So we call my function here, and we pass a 6 and a 3. What do you think we're going to get? We should get a 9, right? Because it's saying this is 6, this is 3. We should get 9. And we do. We get a 9. So you might be wondering, what's the point of functions? And that's a good thing to wonder, right? Because I could write all my code in one line or one section, right, with no indentation and not use any functions. Well, you want to use functions when you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. So let's copy and paste this. Paste, paste, paste. Change some of these numbers around. Test 1, test 2, test 3. Let's say we want to do all of these, right? The thing is, copying, imagine our function is, I don't know, 30 lines. Copying and pasting 30 lines of code for each time you want to call it, if you're calling it 100 times in a program, that's just absurd. We don't want to do that. So we put it in a function, and this is a reusable piece of code. That's the beauty of the function, is that it's reusable. Like I said, imagine this is 30 lines and it's doing something really complex, maybe a complex math problem, or it's doing something complex with a string or an array. We're going to want to be able to reuse that easily, and that's why we use a function. Now, for the time being, I'm going to comment this out by highlighting this, holding control, and pressing K. And I'm going to delete all of these declarations. For your sake, I recommend that you just comment out everything and don't delete anything, because it's going to be good to look back on when you're making your games. The next thing we're going to talk about is arrays. Now, arrays are defined as such. You would say var, you would say what you want to name it, so let's call it my array. Sorry, I said we'd use underscores. I'm coming from JavaScript, so I'm really used to using capitals. So we're going to set that equal to an array. Now, an array is a bunch of values in one. You're going to put these brackets, and you're going to put as many values as you want with commas in between. So let's put 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could also put a string here, hello, if you really wanted to. We're just going to stick with numbers for now to keep stuff simple. Okay, let's print my array. F5. And we get our array. Now, the beauty of this is if we wanted to, we could grab one specific number. So let's grab the first one. We're going to put brackets here, and we're going to put 1. Now, you're going to think that this is going to give me a 0, right? Check this out. It actually gives me 1. That's because arrays have what's known as a 0 index. So the very first thing in the array, this 0, in order to grab it, you have to type 0. So typing 0, F5, we get 0. Now, it's not just because this has the letter 0. Sorry, the number 0. We can make this 220. And grabbing the 0 index is still going to get us 0. Or sorry, it's still going to get us the 0 index, which now is 220. So if I grab the, let's see, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th index, what do you think that's going to get me? If you're guessing 5, you're going to be right. It does get me 5. But again, that's not just because this is 5. I could change this to 20, and now getting the 5th index is going to get me 20. Arrays are a very complicated thing, so if this doesn't make sense to you just yet, that's totally fine. Keep watching, and hopefully they will in a little bit once we get through them a little bit more, because we're going to be working with them a lot. All right. Now, we're going to do something called a for loop. A for loop is a way to loop through all of these options. So let's say for variable in my underscore array colon print variable. What does this mean? For variable in my underscore array. And you'll see it has indentation again. Much like a function, everything that has indentation is going to run inside of this for loop. So what we're really saying here is for each one of these variables inside of the array, do something with them. So variable is actually going to be changing. It's going to run. This is what's known as looping, because we're looping through the array, and variable is going to be each one. It's going to start at 220, then it's going to be 1, then it's going to be 2, then 3, then 4, then 20. So if I open this up, you'll see, boom, they're all printed out on separate lines. Now, let's do this. Let's make var sum equals 0. And instead of printing this, let's say sum plus equals, you know what, that's a little complicated. Let's say sum equals sum plus variable, and then print sum. This is a very simple program right here. What this is going to do is it's going to start out at 0. It's going to loop through each one of these, and it's going to add it to this sum. So sum becomes 220. Then it says, okay, 220 plus 1, 221, 221 plus 2, 223, and it keeps going. So if we run this, we get 250. Now, we're just going to assume that's right because the computer's smarter than us. But if you want to do all the addition in your head or with a calculator, you can double check it. But I'm going to assume it's right because I know how code works. So that is arrays and looping in a nutshell. Okay, next up is going to be dictionaries. A dictionary can be thought of like an object. So it's going to have a key and a value. Let's do this. Var my underscore dictionary, better yet, let's say my underscore dict equals curly brackets, not regular brackets like the array had. These ones are curly brackets, and it's going to have a key and a value. Quote key colon quote value. All right. Now let's print my underscore dict to see what we're working with here. In the console, you'll see we have this key value. Now we could do a couple of these. So let's also do player and set player equal to, you know what? Let's make it a little bit of a game kind of thing. Player underscore health, set that equal to 20. Now, how do I grab something from this? Let's say I want to grab the player health. That's all I want to know. What I would say here is my underscore dict period player underscore health, and we get 20. That's how you work with dictionaries or objects, as they're known in many other languages. It's essentially an array that also has a key, which makes it a little easier, right? Because if I wanted to get something from my array, like I said before, we have to type in that specific number. So let's say the health is 20, we'd have to type in 5. Now, this could change. We could add more values to this array later on. We could get rid of a couple values later on. The nice thing about the dictionary is that the thing that has the key player health will always have that key. The value is what will change. The key will not. One other thing, while we're talking about changing, I want to talk about the word const. Const is essentially something that will never change. So you'll see we have a const integer equals 5 here. Let's try changing this integer, setting it equal to 2. Run it, and you'll see we get an error. The reason that we get this error is because we cannot change a constant variable. When you use the word const, it is making it permanent. Integer will permanently equal 5 as long as the program's running. Alrighty, the last thing that we're going to talk about is going to be conditionals. Now, conditionals are one of the most important things in programming. So, the main kind of a conditional is known as an if statement. If statements are really pretty simple. Try not to overcomplicate them. Think of it like this. If it's raining, then I bring an umbrella. That's an if statement. Now, if it's raining outside, what are you going to do? You're going to bring an umbrella. If it's not raining, you don't bring an umbrella. So, let's write an if statement in code. If, let's say, integer equals. Now for this, we do double equals. 1 equals is assigning. 2 equals is checking if it's true. So if integer equals 5, colon, print true. Let's get rid of this other print statement, and let's run it. We get true. Now, let's say if integer equals 6. Will it print true? No, because integer doesn't equal 6. Integer equals 5. Now there's something we can do here called an else statement. We could write elif. This means else if, and then we could say maybe integer equals 7. What we could say here is print elif is true. That just means else if. So it's going to go if, and then if this is false, it'll go else if. And then what we can write is a catch-all, known as else. Print nothing is true. So what we should get here is nothing is true. And we do. The reason for that is because the code is being read if integer equals 6. Well, it doesn't. It equals 5. Okay, what if it equals 7? It doesn't. It equals 5. Well, else, print nothing is true. Now, let's change integer here to 7. And we should see that we get this elif to be true. And we do. Elif is true. That's the basics of conditionals. One other thing I want to talk about, I'm going to get rid of this elif for now. And I'm going to show you and or. So something you could type here to make this more complicated. Well, you could say this. So you could say if integer equals 6, and then say if second integer equals 7, Let's make this equal 6. Let's make a new variable here called second integer and set that equal to 7. So what we're saying here is if integer equals 6, and then we're also saying if integer equals 7. If second integer equals 7, print true. And we should get true. But there's a way quicker way to write this, a better way. What we can do is copy this and just put the word and at the end of this and paste it. This is essentially saying the exact same thing, because what we're saying here is if integer equals 6 and second integer equals 7. We can run that and we get true. So the way that this works is everything on both sides of the and can be thought of as its own individual if statement. Both of them have to be true. Now what if just one of them is true? Let's make this 8. So now the one on the left is true, the one on the right is false, and we get nothing is true. Well, what if we wanted to run a test where we wanted one of them to be true, make it true? What we could do is instead of an and, we could write an or statement. And that's exactly what or does. It's the same idea as and, except instead of both of them having to be true, only one of them has to be true. And we get true, because one of them is in fact true. Both of them could also be true, but we're not really worried about that with an or. We just care that one of them is true. That's enough for us. Alrighty, and that's going to be it for this beginner tutorial. This is a very basic run through of how to use GDScript. Hopefully this is enough to get you coding and up and running and making a game or two. Now there's more that you can do with this language, there's a lot more, but I wanted to keep this very beginner friendly and just show you the basics. Hopefully this was helpful. If it was, please let me know in the comments and leave a like. Have a great day.